Hi, Guy. Tonight we ascend a seemingly endless staircase, each step echoing with the whispers of generations past. You trudge upwards, the mountain air thin and cool against your face. This is no ordinary climb. This is a journey into the heart of Edo-era Japan, and you probably won't survive this. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Tell me where you're tuning in from and what time it is there. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're 6 years old. Feel that stiff, itchy silk against your skin? That's your kimono, far too elaborate for a child who still finds bugs more fascinating than ceremonies. Each tiny embroidered crane feels like a weight, holding you back from chasing the fat bumblebee buzzing lazily around the wisteria blossoms. You can smell the incense clinging to the air, a cloying sweetness mixed with the earthy scent of the mountain path. Your small hand is swallowed up by your father's. He doesn't speak, his face a mask of solemn expectation. Your mother, her own kimono a riot of color, walks slightly behind, her hand resting lightly on your shoulder. It feels like a silent command. Behave. This isn't the bustling marketplace you love, with its stalls overflowing with candied plums and brightly painted toys. This isn't a festival, with its dancers and drums and the tantalizing aroma of grilled eel. This is different. You don't know where you're going, only that it's important. The path winds ever upwards, the stone steps worn smooth by countless feet that have trod this path before you. Each footfall echoes, a soft whisper in the growing twilight. It feels like the mountain itself is holding its breath. Now, while we climb, let's talk a bit about where we are. Edo, modern-day Tokyo. Picture it, a bustling center of 17th century Japan, the beating heart of the shogunate. Imagine streets teeming with samurai, their swords glinting in the sun, merchants hawking their wares, and elaborate processions winding their way through the crowded lanes. Temples rise above the wooden rooftops, their bells echoing across the city. And, let's not forget, at least 4 people per block claiming to be reincarnated warlords. I mean, who wouldn't want to be a reincarnated warlord? The Edo period was a fascinating time, a melting pot of tradition and change, a period of rigid social structures and surprising bursts of artistic innovation. It's a rich tapestry, and tonight, we're pulling on a single thread. Back to the climb. You stumble, your small legs burning with the effort. Your father tightens his grip, pulling you upwards without a word. You can hear the rhythmic click of your mother's Geta sandals on the stone steps behind you. Think about the sounds surrounding you, the rustle of leaves in the evening breeze, the distant chirp of crickets. And speaking of crickets, quirky tidbit time. Did you know it was fashionable among Edo children to carry pet crickets in tiny, intricately crafted cages? They'd even have cricket chirping contests. Imagine the playground politics. My cricket chirps louder than yours. Oh yeah? Well, my cricket knows the ancient song of the mountain spirits. I wonder if the crickets ever got annoyed. Maybe they had tiny cricket unions, demanding better working conditions and more millet seeds. History is silent on the matter, sadly. You reach a landing, a small, flat area carved into the mountainside. You gasp for breath, the thin mountain air cool against your burning lungs. You look down, but the path below is already shrouded in shadows. You look up, and the staircase continues, disappearing into the darkness above. Your heart beats like a trapped bird in your chest. As we continue our climb, let's delve into a more serious topic. The Edo period was a time of rigid social hierarchies. Women in particular faced numerous restrictions, and that brings us to a point of scholarly debate that continues to this day. The role and status of geisha. Were they primarily victims of exploitation, forced into a life of servitude? Or did the geisha system, in its own complex way, offer women a degree of agency, a path to education, artistic expression, and even economic independence in a society that offered them few other options? It's a complex question, one with no easy answers. The reality, as is often the case, likely lies somewhere in the nuanced space between these two extremes. Think about that as we continue our ascent. The steps become steeper, more uneven. The air grows colder, biting at your exposed skin. The incense smell fades, replaced by the scent of pine needles and damp earth. Fear, cold and sharp, begins to prickle at the edges of your awareness. You want to ask where you're going? what's waiting for you at the top of this endless staircase. But something in your parents' silence, in the solemnity of their faces, keeps you quiet. You climb for what feels like an eternity. The darkness deepens, the only light coming from the flickering paper lantern your father carries. The shadows dance around you, twisting into strange, unsettling shapes. You squeeze your father's hand tighter, seeking comfort in his presence, even though his hand feels cold and distant. He doesn't look at you, his gaze fixed on the path ahead. He's leading you somewhere, but you don't know where. And that's the most terrifying part of all. Finally, you reach the top. You stand on a wide plateau, the wind whipping around you, carrying the scent of distant rain. Before you stands a massive wooden gate, its surface weathered and worn, adorned with intricate carvings of mythical creatures. The gate is closed, barring your way. Two figures, cloaked in shadow, stand guard on either side. They don't move, don't speak. They simply watch you, their presence, a silent, ominous wait. Your parents stop. Your father releases your hand, and the sudden absence of his touch leaves you feeling strangely exposed, vulnerable. He turns to you, his face illuminated by the flickering lantern light. For the first time, he speaks. His voice is low, almost a whisper, but it carries in the wind. "This," he says, "is where your journey begins. And that, my friends, is where we leave you for tonight, hanging on a cliff, metaphorically speaking. What lies beyond that gate? What fate awaits our young protagonist? We'll explore that next time. Remember to like, subscribe, and tell me your thoughts in the comments. Sleep tight, and don't let the crickets bite." The Okiya stood before me like a solemn temple, its dark wooden facade hinting at secrets held within. It promised not enlightenment, but years of rigorous training, a relentless pursuit of refinement, less yoga retreat, more boot camp, though I suspected the snacks would be considerably better. The sliding doors, intricately carved with scenes of cranes in flight, seemed to sigh open, revealing a dimly lit interior fragrant with incense and something subtly floral. This was it, the point of no return. The Okasan, the house mother, a woman whose age was impossible to decipher beneath the artful paint and carefully arranged coiffure, stood waiting. She assessed me with a single, sweeping glance, her expression as unreadable as a no mask. I felt a shiver run down my spine, a strange mixture of anticipation and apprehension. My parents bowed low, their farewell swift and formal, devoid of lingering sentimentality. Their duty was done. I was now the Okiya's responsibility. The sliding doors closed behind them with a soft click, sealing me within this new, unknown world. The Okiya felt like stepping into a different era. The air hung heavy with tradition. Every gesture, every word seemed imbued with meaning. I was immediately ushered away by a young woman, her face delicately painted, her kimono a riot of subdued colors. She introduced herself as one of the senior geisha, my wani-san or elder sister, and she would be responsible for guiding me through the initial stages of my training. My room, or rather my designated corner of a larger room, was sparsely furnished. A futon rolled neatly against the wall, a low table for study, and a small chest for my meager belongings. My wani-san explained the strict hierarchy of the Akiya, the complex web of relationships and obligations that governed every aspect of our lives. I was at the very bottom, a shikomi, a novice, expected to perform the most menial tasks, from scrubbing floors to serving tea. Humility was paramount. Obedience, absolute. And so began the rigorous, relentless training. Days bled into weeks, weeks into months. My hands, once soft and unblemished, became calloused from endless chores. My days were filled with lessons, the graceful movements of traditional dance, the precise plucking of the shamisen strings, the intricate art of the tea ceremony. I learned to speak in the refined Kyoto dialect, to modulate my voice, to choose my words with the utmost care. The world outside the Okiya faded into a distant memory. I learned that a geisha was not simply a courtesan, as some might believe. Our training encompassed a wide range of artistic disciplines: music, dance, poetry, storytelling, the art of conversation. We were expected to be cultivated companions, skilled in the art of entertaining and putting guests at ease. One of the most fascinating and perhaps slightly unsettling aspects of our training was the makeup. The thick white foundation, The meticulously drawn eyebrows and lips, the elaborate hairstyles. It was a transformation, a mask that concealed our true selves and presented an idealized image of feminine beauty. I remember one particularly memorable lesson about the traditional makeup ingredients. My wani-san, with a perfectly straight face, explained the use of ugisu no fun, or nightingale droppings, as an exfoliant. Glamour, it seemed, always came at a price. In this case, a slightly fragrant one. Evenings were often spent observing the senior geisha preparing for their engagements. I watched in awe as they transformed themselves into ethereal creatures, their movements graceful and fluid, their laughter light and musical. They seemed to embody an entirely different world, a world of elegance and refinement that I could only dream of inhabiting one day. The okiya itself became a subject of intense scrutiny. We were taught the history of the house, its traditions, its lineage. It was, in a way, our surrogate family. The oka-san, despite her stern demeanor, was a constant presence, overseeing our training, offering guidance, and occasionally a rare word of praise. But the nature of the okiya, its true function, remained a source of quiet contemplation. I learned later that historians debated the extent to which geisha houses functioned as surrogate families, or strictly as business enterprises. The lines, it seemed, were often blurred. As the months passed, I began to understand the complex dynamics of the okiya. It was a microcosm of society, with its own intricate hierarchy, its own unwritten rules. There were rivalries and alliances, moments of kindness and moments of cruelty. We were all bound together by our shared experience, by the relentless pursuit of perfection. We were sisters, competitors, and confidants, all navigating the treacherous path towards becoming a true geisha. The okiya's embrace, though strict and demanding, had become my new reality. I was no longer the girl who stood hesitantly on the threshold. I was becoming part of something ancient, something intricate, something utterly unique. The journey was arduous, the sacrifices were great, but the allure of the geisha world, the promise of artistry and refinement, kept me striving, kept me yearning for the day I could finally take my place amongst the painted ladies of the okiya. The tatami mats were cool beneath my bare feet, a stark contrast to the burning in my arms. They ached with a dull throb, a constant reminder of the endless scrubbing I had been doing since before sunrise. The okasan's geta, those impossibly elegant lacquered platforms, seemed to multiply with each passing hour. Each scuff, each speck of dust was a personal affront, requiring immediate and silent rectification. My sleeves, far too long for my small frame, dipped precariously close to the sudsy water as I scrubbed, a constant threat of soaking the silk and earning a sharp reprimand. I bit my lip, the taste of salt mingling with the lingering scent of the cleaning solution. I couldn't cry. Not now. Not ever, it seemed. Crying was for children, and a shikomi, even one as young as I, was expected to be something more. Something less, perhaps. Less of a person and more of a shadow. 6 years old. That's all I was when they brought me here. To the okiya, a world of whispers and rustling silk. A world where children were seen and not heard. Especially not heard. Silence was the rule. Obedience the law. Every movement, every breath was scrutinized. The okasan's eyes, sharp and assessing, followed me everywhere, making my stomach clench with a perpetual knot of anxiety. Even now, as I polished yet another pair of geta, I could feel her gaze, a tangible weight on my back. A single grain of rice, carelessly dropped from the serving bowl, rolled across the polished wooden floor. My heart lurched. It was a tiny thing, insignificant in the grand scheme of things, yet here, within these walls, it was a transgression, a symbol of disrespect, a slap in the face to the unseen farmers who toiled under the hot sun to bring forth the harvest. I scrambled to retrieve it, my fingers clumsy with fear. I imagined the okasan's disappointed frown, the sharp words that would follow. Even the other shikomi, older and more experienced in the art of invisibility, seemed to hold their breath, waiting for the inevitable reprimand. The silence that followed was thick with anticipation. I carefully placed the errant grain back in the bowl, my hands trembling slightly. The incident, though minor, served as a stark reminder of the precarious balance of my existence. I thought of my mother, of her warm smile and the way she used to sing me to sleep. Her hands, calloused from work but gentle on my skin, were a world away from the smooth, calculating hands of the okasan. Had my mother known what awaited me here? Had she known about the endless chores, the constant scrutiny, the suffocating silence? I pushed the thoughts away. Dwelling on the past was a luxury I couldn't afford. I had to focus on the present, on the task at hand, on surviving. Later, huddled in the small sleeping quarters I shared with the other Shikomi, I overheard whispers about the life that awaited me. They spoke of the intricate dances, the beautiful kimonos, the captivating art of conversation. They spoke of becoming Gaiko, of entertaining powerful men and earning respect, even admiration. But their voices were tinged with weariness, a hint of something unspoken, something hidden beneath the surface of their practiced smiles. I wondered about the price of such a transformation. What parts of myself would I have to shed, to bury deep within the folds of my elaborate kimono? Would I still recognize myself beneath the layers of paint and powder, beneath the carefully constructed mask of a Gaiko? The historians, they write about us, about the Shikomi, the silent servants, the invisible girls. They debate the merits of our training, arguing about resilience and trauma, analyzing the psychological impact of a childhood spent in servitude. They dissect our lives with their academic words, searching for meaning in our silence. Do they understand, I wonder? Do they understand the weight of that silence? The way it crushes you, molds you, transforms you into something you may not even recognize? Some say it strengthens you, that the hardships, the discipline, the relentless pursuit of perfection forge a steel within you, an unyielding resilience that allows you to weather any storm. Perhaps they are right. Perhaps there is a strength to be found in enduring the unbearable. Others speak of the trauma, the scars left by a childhood robbed of its innocence. They point to the emotional repression, the stifled creativity, the potential for long-lasting psychological damage. And perhaps they too are right. Perhaps the silence, meant to shape us into obedient instruments, instead carves deep wounds that never truly heal. The truth, I suspect, lies somewhere in between. A delicate balance between resilience and trauma, between the strength gained and the innocence lost. A constant negotiation between the person I once was and the Gaiko I am becoming. The floorboards creaked as the Okusan approached. Instinctively, I lowered my head, my gaze fixed on the worn tatami mats. The silence descended once more, thick and heavy, a blanket that smothered all thought, all emotion. I was a Shikomi, a shadow in the world of whispers and rustling silk, and in that silence, I waited, I observed, I learned, and somewhere, deep within the quiet chambers of my heart, I prayed for the strength to survive. Posture training began the next morning, not the gentle stretching and graceful poses I'd imagined, but Soothe, that deceptively simple-looking posture of kneeling with your legs folded beneath you. It sounds almost restful, doesn't it? Like something you might try while meditating or reaching for the remote. It is not. It's an exquisite form of torture disguised as polite sitting. My legs began to scream within minutes, then they started whimpering. Finally, they descended into a full-blown, silent shriek that only I could hear. My spine, not to be outdone, threatened to stage a walkout. I felt a distinct popping sensation somewhere in my lower back, and I swear I heard a tiny voice whisper, "I'm out of here." We held the position, immobile, while Madame Chiyo surveyed us with a critical eye. She glided through the room, a whisper of silk and disapproval, adjusting a tilted head here, a slumped shoulder there. "Imagine," she purred, her voice like wind chimes in a graveyard, "you are a willow branch in a gentle breeze, yielding yet unbroken, effortless yet controlled." My willow branch felt distinctly broken, and very, very effortful. The Soothe practice, however, was just the beginning. We learned to walk, not stride, not saunter, but glide. Our footsteps had to be silent, our movements fluid and graceful, our presence barely noticeable. Imagine ninja training, but with more silk and fewer shurikens. We balanced trays laden with teacups, walking across paper-thin wooden bridges without spilling a drop. We learned to open and close sliding doors without a sound, to anticipate needs before they were voiced, to blend into the background like shadows in the moonlight. "A geisha," Madame Chiyo instructed, her voice a low hum, "should be a whisper, not a shout. A subtle fragrance, not a pungent perfume. She should be seen, yet unseen. Felt, yet intangible." I was starting to feel intangible all right, mostly in my legs, which I was pretty sure had ceased to exist below the knee. Soothe, I learned, was not just about posture. It was about discipline, control, and, I suspected, a healthy dose of masochism. It was the foundation upon which the entire geisha persona was built. It was, according to Madame Chiyo, the gateway to invisibility, the key to becoming a phantom, a wraith, a whisper in the wind. Fact, seiza, the traditional Japanese kneeling position, was indeed considered a sign of respect and discipline. But it also, as I was rapidly discovering, caused significant physical discomfort, especially for those new to the practice. This wasn't just discomfort. This was a full-body rebellion. My muscles ached, my joints groaned, and my circulation had decided to take a vacation somewhere south of my ankles. The evenings offered little respite from the physical demands of the day. While we were spared the soothe during meals and other informal gatherings, the emphasis on maintaining perfect posture never ceased. Even during our lessons on flower arranging or calligraphy, Madame Chiyo's eagle eyes would spot any slouching or slumping, resulting in swift and pointed corrections. And then there was the sleeping. Oh, the sleeping. Forget sinking into a plush feather bed after a long day. We slept on thin futons laid out on the floor. Not a problem in itself, but coupled with the elaborate hairstyles we were required to wear, it became an exercise in contorted origami. Each night, our hair was painstakingly styled into intricate updos, secured with a multitude of pins and combs. To preserve these creations, we used special wooden neck rests called takamakura. Quirky tidbit: geishas use these takamakura to prevent their elaborate hairstyles from becoming flattened or disheveled during sleep. Imagine waking up with a crick in your neck and a lacquer explosion. No thanks. I envisioned waking up resembling a startled porcupine, with pins and combs scattered across the futon like shrapnel. The takamakura, while ingenious in its design, was not exactly comfortable. It felt like trying to sleep with a small, lacquered log nestled under my neck. I wasn't alone in my suffering. The other girls, although more accustomed to the rigors of training than I, also bore the marks of soothe and sleep deprivation. We shared whispered complaints and traded tips on how to alleviate the aches and pains. Hot baths, herbal compresses, and surreptitious stretches in the privacy of our rooms became our nightly rituals. Later, I learned there was an ongoing scholarly debate about the long-term health effects of prolonged soothe. Some suggested it could lead to joint problems and circulatory issues. Scholarly debate. This isn't just anecdotal whining. There's actual research on the potential long-term health effects of prolonged soothe. Some studies indicate a correlation between prolonged soothe and conditions like osteoarthritis and peripheral neuropathy. It made me wonder about the long-term cost of this elegant, agonizing tradition. Were we sacrificing our physical well-being for the sake of artistry? It was a question I couldn't answer, not yet. For now, survival meant mastering the art of vanishing, of becoming a silent, graceful shadow in the world of the geisha. And that meant enduring the soothe, the takamakura, and the constant, unrelenting pursuit of perfection, one excruciatingly painful posture at a time. The silk whispered against my skin, a cool caress that quickly became a stifling embrace. It started innocently enough. A riot of color, a waterfall of embroidered cherry blossoms cascading down a vibrant crimson field. My first kimono. A gift, they said, to mark my passage into womanhood. More like a sentence, I thought, as layer upon layer of silk and brocade were draped, wrapped, and tucked around me. I went from child to walking art installation in the space of an hour. Each fold, each pleat, a testament to the artistry of the dressers who fussed and fretted over every detail. And the obi! Oh, the obi! That massive sash, a work of art in itself, woven with gold thread and depicting a mythical phoenix taking flight. It felt like it weighed more than I did. Fashion is pain, darling. In Edo, Japan, it's also a serious workout. My legs, unaccustomed to the restrictive folds of the garment, felt like lead weights. My arms, pinned to my sides by the multiple layers, could barely move. I could feel the blood rushing to my face, partly from exertion, partly from the sheer panic of being trapped inside this magnificent, suffocating cocoon. I tried to take a deep breath, but the obi cinched tight around my waist restricted my lungs. A little tighter, one of the dressers chirped, oblivious to my impending asphyxiation. It needs to be secure. Secure? It felt like a python, slowly squeezing the life out of me. I'd seen the geisha glide effortlessly through the streets, their kimonos flowing gracefully behind them. They made it look so easy, so elegant. I, on the other hand, felt like a trussed-up turkey, waddling awkwardly across the room, terrified of tripping over the hem and ending up face down in a pile of expensive silk. The older women clucked and cooed, admiring the transformation. "A vision of beauty," one declared. "A true work of art," another agreed. I just wanted to sit down, preferably lie down, and never move again. Later, I learned that the geisha's seemingly effortless grace was the result of years of rigorous training. Their kimonos, even more elaborate than mine, were complex garments, often consisting of multiple layers: the juban, the underkimono, the asterisk naga juban, a longer underkimono, the kimono itself, and finally, the obi, each requiring specific folds and ties. Dressing a geisha was a ritual, a carefully choreographed performance involving multiple assistants and taking hours to complete. It was a far cry from my own clumsy attempts to navigate the confines of my first kimono. The geisha weren't just wearing clothes. They were embodying a tradition, a history, a culture, and they made it look breathtakingly effortless. There was another, more subtle aspect to the kimono experience: the scent. The fabric, often stored with fragrant sachets, held a delicate, lingering perfume. It wasn't overpowering, but rather a subtle whisper of incense, sandalwood, and perhaps a hint of cherry blossom. Imagine your clothes smelling permanently like a temple. Not bad, actually. It was a sensory detail that added to the overall mystique of the garment, a subtle reminder of its cultural significance. The intricate designs weren't just for aesthetic pleasure. They were often imbued with symbolic meaning. The colors, the patterns, the embroidery, each element told a story, conveyed a message. A crane, symbolizing longevity. A tortoise, representing wisdom. Cherry blossoms, ephemeral beauty. The flowing water patterns on my own kimono were meant to signify prosperity and good fortune. I couldn't help but wonder if anyone ever truly deciphered all the hidden messages woven into the fabric. This symbolic language of the kimono continues to fascinate historians and scholars. They pore over antique garments, analyzing the intricate details, debating the significance of specific motifs and color combinations. Was a particular shade of red meant to signify passion or simply status? Did the arrangement of the cherry blossoms represent a specific season or a hidden message of love? The scholarly debate rages on, adding another layer of complexity to the already intricate world of the kimono. As I finally managed to sit down, carefully arranging the folds of my kimono around me, I began to appreciate the weight of the garment, both literally and figuratively. It wasn't just a piece of clothing. It was a symbol of tradition, a work of art, a story waiting to be told. It was a weight I was just beginning to understand, a weight I would carry with me as I navigated the complexities of my own journey into womanhood. And despite the initial discomfort, the restricted breathing, and the fear of tripping, I felt a strange sense of pride, a sense of belonging. I was wearing more than just a kimono. I was wearing a piece of history. The silk whispered against my skin, a cool caress under the heavy layers of kimono. It felt foreign, restrictive, a costume rather than clothing. My obi, tied in the elaborate musubi knot of a minarai, dug into my ribs with every breath. It was showtime, kiddo, and I could practically hear the rustle of programs and the hushed whispers of the audience. My own personal critics, a panel of discerning eyes ready to dissect every flutter of my fan, every tilt of my head. The mask was on. Oshiroi, thick and white, covered my face and neck, a stark canvas for the carefully drawn lines of rouge and black ink. My lips, a crimson half-moon, felt stiff and unnatural. It was more than makeup. It was a transformation. Beneath the white paste and paint, the nervous girl from the countryside vanished, replaced by the serene, composed image of a minarai. The scent, faintly sweet and oddly earthy, hung in the air, a constant reminder of the nightingale droppings that contributed to this flawless facade. Just when I thought the nightingale droppings thing was over, my hands, trembling slightly, steadied as I lifted the lacquered tea tray. Every movement had been practiced, drilled into me, until it became second nature. Grace, they said, was the key. Grace and a smile that never wavered. I glided across the tatami mats, my steps small and precise, the rustle of my silk skirts the only sound. This world, the world of the geisha, was a carefully choreographed performance. Every gesture, every word, every glance was laden with meaning, a subtle language I was only beginning to understand. Tonight, I was a shadow, an attendant to Hana-san, a senior geisha whose reputation preceded her. My role was to observe, to learn, to absorb the intricate dance of social interaction that unfolded before me. I watched as Hana-san navigated the room with effortless charm, her laughter like the chime of tiny bells, her words carefully chosen and perfectly timed. She was a master of her craft, a living embodiment of the geisha ideal. The men, wealthy merchants and influential officials, hung on her every word. Their eyes, however, flickered occasionally towards me, assessing, evaluating. I was a novelty, a fresh face in a familiar world. Their scrutiny was intense, unnerving, a constant hum beneath the surface of polite conversation. As I poured tea, my hands steady now, I listened intently to the conversation swirling around me. Politics, poetry, the latest gossip. The topic shifted seamlessly, a tapestry woven with wit and innuendo. I observed the subtle cues, the unspoken language of fans and glances, the delicate art of flattery and veiled criticism. It was a fascinating, intoxicating world, and I felt a flicker of excitement, a spark of ambition ignite within me. Hana-san, sensing my eagerness, included me in the conversation, drawing me out with gentle questions about my training. I answered carefully, my voice soft and demure, aware that every word I uttered was being scrutinized. This was my audition, my chance to prove myself worthy of this world. Later, as we walked back to the Okiya, Hana-san broke the silence. "You did well tonight, little one," she said, her voice kind. "You have a quick mind and a keen eye. You will learn quickly." Her praise, though measured, warmed me. It was a small victory, a step forward on the long and arduous path I had chosen. But even in the quiet of the night, the image of the white mask, the Oshiroi, lingered in my mind. This meticulously crafted facade, this intricate performance, was it a prison or a shield? I thought about the scholarly debates I had overheard, discussions about the meaning of the Oshiroi. Some argued it was purely aesthetic, a way to enhance beauty and create a blank canvas for artistic expression. Others saw it as a link to ancient theatrical traditions, a mask that allowed the geisha to transcend her earthly identity and embody a role. Perhaps, I mused, it was both, a mask that both concealed and revealed, a performance that was both artifice and truth. The nightingale droppings, that peculiar ingredient, suddenly took on a new significance. Something discarded, transformed into something beautiful and precious. Perhaps, just perhaps, the same could be said of me, stripped bare of my former identity, molded and shaped by the rigorous training. I was being transformed into something new, something different. The road ahead was long and challenging, but for the first time, I felt a glimmer of hope, a sense of purpose. The mask, though heavy, offered a strange kind of freedom. It allowed me to step onto the stage, to play my part, to become someone else, someone more. And in that transformation, I might just find myself, the shamisen. 3 strings, my voice. It wasn't just an instrument. It was an extension of my soul, a conduit for the ache in my chest, the longing in my gut. Each plucked note, a tiny shard of heartbreak, resonated with a raw, emotive power that words could never capture. It was Edo-era rock and roll, stripped down and achingly vulnerable. The music I wrung from those strings wasn't just pretty melodies. It was a howl against the constraints of my life, a defiant cry in the face of tradition. My days were consumed by practice. Hours bled into one another, marked only by the rising and setting sun and the relentless rhythm of my calloused fingers dancing across the strings. My teachers, stern and unforgiving, pushed me to the brink. Perfection was their mantra, and anything less was met with swift, merciless correction. A misplaced finger, a wavering note, a lapse in concentration. Each mistake was a transgression, punished with a sharp word, a withering look, or another hour of grueling practice. My fingertips, perpetually raw and bleeding, became a testament to my dedication, a physical manifestation of the sacrifices I made at the altar of the shamisen. They said the shamisen was a geisha's voice, and they were right. It was the heart of every performance, the backbone of every story. Its music painted vivid pictures, evoked powerful emotions, and transported the audience to another world. Whether accompanying a delicate dance, a haunting melody, or a captivating tale, the shamisen was the glue that held it all together, the vibrant thread that wove the tapestry of the performance. It was more than just music. It was magic. The silk strings, shimmering under the flickering lamplight, vibrated with a unique warmth and resonance. It was a sound that spoke to my soul, a sound that resonated with centuries of tradition. There was something almost sacred about those silk strings, a connection to the past, to the generations of musicians who had poured their hearts and souls into this instrument. It was a legacy I was determined to uphold, a tradition I was desperate to make my own. And yet there was also a rebellious streak within me, a desire to push the boundaries of tradition, to infuse this ancient instrument with a raw, modern energy. It was a delicate balance, a tightrope walk between reverence and innovation. I remember overhearing whispers among the older geisha about the newer strings, the ones not made of silk. They spoke of them with a mixture of disdain and fascination, like they were some kind of forbidden fruit. Imagine, one would whisper, strings not spun from the finest silk. What has the world come to? But even in their disapproval, there was a hint of curiosity, a grudging acknowledgement that times were changing. And me? I was intrigued. There was something thrilling about the idea of breaking with tradition, of experimenting with new materials, new sounds. It was the same rebellious spirit that fueled my desire to inject a raw, emotive power into the traditional shamisen music. It was rock and roll, Edo style, played on strings spun from, well, not always silk, it turned out. And that was okay. The scholars, they had their debates. Endless discussions about the evolution of shamisen music, its origins, its influences, its relationship to other traditional Japanese forms. They dissected every note, every rhythm, every nuance, searching for meaning and connection. They traced the lineage of different playing styles, arguing over the authenticity of various techniques. I overheard their conversations, snippets of academic jargon drifting through the paper walls of the tea house. Modal interchange, they'd say, or heterophonic texture. I didn't always understand their words, but I understood their passion, their deep reverence for the music. And in their own way, they were just as obsessed with the shamisen as I was. They were trying to understand its past, while I was trying to shape its future. The weight of the shamisen in my lap, the smooth feel of the neck under my hand, the vibrant hum of the strings. It was all a comfort, a refuge, a source of strength. It was more than just an instrument. It was my voice, my story, my rebellion. It was the sound of my heart breaking and healing, all at the same time. And with every note I played, I felt myself becoming more, not less. I was a geisha, yes, but I was also a musician, an artist, a storyteller. And the shamisen, that three-stringed instrument with its silk, or not silk, strings, was my weapon, my shield, my salvation. It was the soundtrack of my life. A song of heartbreak and longing, played with a raw, emotive power that resonated deep within my soul. And it was rock and roll, Edo style, all the way. The air in the okiya hung thick with the scent of jasmine and anticipation. Tonight was my first real test. A dinner with a group of prominent businessmen, all known for their sharp minds and even sharper attentions. Okasan had drilled me relentlessly, her lessons a whirlwind of etiquette, history, and the subtle art of verbal deflection. Think of it as verbal judo, she'd explained, her eyes twinkling. A gentle push in the right direction. A little flattery here, a suggestive glance there, and when things get sticky, you redirect. Like a willow in the wind, bend but don't break. And remember, a well-timed giggle can diffuse almost anything. She then poured me a thimbleful of sake, a mischievous glint in her eye. Practice makes perfect, little willow. My heart hammered against my ribs as I entered the room, the silken rustle of my kimono, a small counterpoint to the boisterous laughter of the men. This was it, my geisha debut. I offered a deep bow, my eyes modestly downcast, then gracefully poured the sake, my hands steady despite my inner turmoil. The conversation swirled around me, a heady mix of business deals, political gossip, and playful banter. Okasan's lessons echoed in my ears. Engage, entertain, enchant. One of the men, a portly fellow with a booming laugh, turned his attention to me. He complimented my kimono, then my hair, his gaze lingering a little too long on my neckline. My stomach churned. This was it. The sticky situation Okasan had warned about. Remembering her advice, I offered a demure smile and a light, airy laugh. "Oh, you flatter me, sir. This old thing? It's nothing compared to the exquisite silk your wife wore at the Spring Festival. I hear it was imported directly from Kyoto. Simply breathtaking." I saw him visibly preen at the mention of his wife. Crisis averted. For now. Another man, younger and more forward, reached out to touch my fan. My hand instinctively moved to block him, but then I remembered another of Okasan's lessons. The fan. Not just for cooling, but for communicating. With a flick of my wrist, I snapped the fan open, creating a delicate barrier between us while simultaneously drawing attention to its intricate design. "This fan," I said, tracing the painted scene of a moonlit garden with my fingertip, "was a gift from my sensei. She says it reminds her of the poems of Lady Murasaki. Do you know her work?" The young man, momentarily flustered, stammered a reply, completely diverted from his previous intentions. "The original, talking with your hands, indeed." As the evening progressed, I found myself growing more comfortable, navigating the conversational currents with increasing confidence. I learned to anticipate the direction of the conversation, steering it away from potentially awkward topics with well-placed questions and witty anecdotes. I discovered the power of a shared laugh, the disarming charm of a self-deprecating joke. It was a delicate dance, a constant interplay of listening, responding, and subtly redirecting. One of the men, clearly a bit too much sake into the evening, began to wax poetic about the beauty of geishas, his words bordering on the inappropriate. Instead of shrinking back, I leaned forward, my eyes wide with feigned interest. Oh, how fascinating. I've always been curious about the history of geisha arts. Did you know that some historians believe, and I launched into a detailed explanation of the scholarly debate surrounding the scripted versus improvised nature of geisha conversations. His eyes glazed over almost immediately, and by the time I finished my mini-lecture he had forgotten what he was originally saying. Verbal judo, indeed. Later, as I helped Okasan prepare the tea, I confided my anxieties about the evening. I felt like I was constantly walking a tightrope, I admitted, trying not to offend while also protecting myself. Okasan smiled knowingly. "You did wonderfully, little Willow. You bent, but you didn't break." Remember, the art of being a geisha is not just about entertaining, it's about control. Control of the conversation, control of the atmosphere, and ultimately, control of your own destiny. She then shared a fascinating tidbit I hadn't known. Geishas in the Edo period, she explained, were highly skilled conversationalists, their training emphasizing wit, charm, and the ability to navigate complex social situations. Their conversations weren't just idle chatter. They were carefully crafted performances, designed to entertain, inform, and subtly influence the men around them. "Think of it as a game," she said, her eyes twinkling. "A game of wit and words, where the geisha always holds the winning hand." That night, as I lay in my futon, the echoes of laughter and conversation still ringing in my ears, I realized that Okasan was right. It was a game, and I was starting to learn how to play it. The art of deflection, the Edo-style conversation, flattery without lying, suggestion without promising, the delicate art of changing the subject. It was more than just a survival skill. It was a form of art. And tonight, I had taken my first tentative steps towards mastering it. The path ahead was long and challenging, I knew, but for the first time, I felt a flicker of confidence, a sense of excitement for the journey to come, and maybe, just maybe, a little bit of pride in my newfound ability to wield the power of words like a seasoned geisha. The scent of cherry blossom incense hung heavy in the air, a cloying sweetness that mirrored the unease twisting in Hana's stomach. The whispers had started a week ago, flitting through the okiya like restless sparrows. Adana, a wealthy merchant from Kyoto, they said, with a taste for the finer things, like a prized geisha on his arm. Okasan had been coy, her smiles tight-lipped, but the gleam in her eye spoke volumes. This was a chance, a lifeline for the struggling okiya, and for Hana, it was a shadow looming large, promising both security and a gilded cage. The concept of Adana was ingrained in their world, a fixture as familiar as the samison's plaintive melody. He was the patron, the benefactor, the man whose deep pockets kept the delicate machinery of a geisha's life oiled and running. He paid for the exquisite silks that draped their bodies, the intricate hairstyles that framed their faces, the rigorous training that honed their skills. He was the gatekeeper to the opulent world of tea houses and exclusive gatherings. Alluring, certainly, but the undercurrent of obligation, the subtle shift in power, sent a shiver down Hana's spine. It wasn't a fairy tale. It was a transaction, a delicate dance between need and leverage. Hana understood the necessity. She'd seen firsthand the financial burden her training placed on the Okiya. The constant worry etched on Okasan's face. Kimono were not woven from air, lessons did not come free, and even the rice that filled their bowls came at a cost. Adana's patronage meant stability, not just for Hana, but for the entire household. It meant a reprieve from the constant pressure, a chance to breathe, to focus on honing her art without the gnawing anxiety of survival. But the whispers also carried a darker undertone. Stories of Dana who wielded their influence like a weapon, demanding more than just companionship, pushing the boundaries of propriety. Stories of geisha trapped in gilded cages, their smiles painted over a simmering resentment. Hana had seen it in the eyes of some of the older geisha, a weary resignation that spoke of compromises made, freedoms bartered for security. Okasan had tried to paint a rosy picture, emphasizing the respect and generosity of this particular Dana. He was a man of culture, she'd insisted, a connoisseur of the arts, who appreciated the refined elegance of a geisha's company. He understood the traditions, the delicate balance of this unique relationship. He wouldn't demand more than what was expected, but Hana couldn't shake the feeling that she was a pawn in a larger game, a piece being moved across the board in a strategic play for power and influence. The fact remained that Adana's support was the backbone of their world. He covered the exorbitant costs of a geisha's training, from the intricate dance lessons to the subtle art of conversation, from the selection of the perfect kimono to the mastery of the shamisen. Without a patron, a geisha's path was fraught with financial peril, a precarious tightrope walk between artistic aspirations and the harsh realities of survival. The Dana system, for all its complexities, offered a degree of financial independence that was rare for women in their restrictive society. Then there was the quirky, almost scandalous tidbit whispered among the geisha. This particular Dana was already married. The relationship, therefore, would be conducted with the utmost discretion, a secret woven into the fabric of their lives. Hana couldn't help but scoff at the irony. Respect, honor, tradition. These were the values constantly preached to them, yet here was a system built on secrecy and veiled arrangements, a system that allowed powerful men to compartmentalize their lives, keeping their public image pristine while indulging in hidden pleasures. It was a hypocrisy that left a bitter taste in her mouth. Later, huddled with her closest friend Kimi, Hana voiced her anxieties. Kimi, older and wiser in the ways of the Okiya, listened patiently, her expression a mix of empathy and pragmatism. The Dana system, she'd said, her voice low, is a subject of much debate, even among scholars. Some see it as exploitation, plain and simple, a way for men to exert their power and control over women. Others argue that it provided geisha with a unique form of agency, a chance to navigate a patriarchal society on their own terms. Kimi's words resonated with Hana's own conflicted feelings. Was it exploitation or empowerment? A gilded cage or a stepping stone? The answer, she suspected, wasn't so simple. It was a complex tapestry, woven with threads of tradition, necessity, and the ever-present power dynamics between men and women. The Dana's shadow stretched long, reaching across generations of geisha, and Hana, caught in its path, knew she had a difficult choice to make. A choice that would determine not only her future, but the very essence of who she was. The crisp silk of my furosode rustled around me, a vibrant splash of color against the muted tones of the Okiya walls. Today was the day I graduated from the flat-soled Geta to Okobo. Towering, precarious Okobo. Mother presented them with a flourish, the lacquered wood gleaming under the soft light. They were beautiful. Undeniably, like miniature red and gold pagodas perched precariously on blocks of polished wood. They were also, I suspected, instruments of torture cleverly disguised as footwear. My first attempt to stand in them was wobbly. Imagine balancing on two narrow planks, several inches high, with only a thin thong to anchor your feet. Now imagine doing that while wearing layers of heavy silk and trying to maintain an air of serene elegance. Fashion, always worth dying for. My knees buckled, my arms windmilled, and I grabbed onto Mother with a yelp. She, TSKED, a sound like a silkworm spinning disapproval. A maiko must glide, not stumble, she admonished, her eyes sharp. These okobo are a symbol of your progress, your elevation. They mark you as a maiko on the path to becoming a geisha. You must wear them with grace. Grace? Right, because balancing on miniature stilts while simultaneously trying not to faceplant is the epitome of grace. So began my rigorous training in the art of okobo locomotion. Every step was a calculated risk, a delicate negotiation between gravity and dignity. The polished wooden soles offered no traction whatsoever, making even the slightest incline a treacherous climb. And forget about sudden gusts of wind. Those were the natural enemies of okobo wearers everywhere. I learned to glide, my feet moving in tiny, precise increments. No more carefree strides. No more skipping down the street. Now every movement was deliberate, measured, and accompanied by the distinctive clack-clack of the okobo against the stone pavements. That click, it became the soundtrack of my new life, a constant reminder of my precarious perch, both literally and metaphorically. It wasn't just about walking, either. I had to learn to navigate stairs, uneven surfaces, and the ever-present threat of rain-slicked cobblestones. Imagine walking on stilts with no shock absorption. Fun times. I envisioned myself sprawled on the ground, my elaborate hairstyle ruined, my okobo scattered like fallen dominoes. The shame would be unbearable. So I practiced. Hours and hours, until my legs ached and my feet throbbed. Slowly, painstakingly, I began to master the art of okobo walking. The clicking became less of a frantic clatter and more of a rhythmic beat, a steady pulse accompanying my newfound grace. The okobo were more than just footwear. They were a symbol of my status as a maiko, a visible marker of my rank and training stage. Like the elaborate hairstyles and vibrant kimono, the okobo signified my place within the intricate hierarchy of the geisha world. They elevated me, both physically and metaphorically, setting me apart from the ordinary world. They spoke of dedication, discipline, and the unwavering pursuit of beauty, even in the face of discomfort. And, believe me, there was discomfort. Lots of it. Thinking about the history of these curious shoes added another layer of meaning to my aching feet. I learned that okobo, with their distinctive shape and impractical design, have a long and fascinating history. They were originally worn by courtesans and high-ranking women during the Edo period, a time of flourishing arts and culture in Japan. The height of the okobo varied depending on the wearer's status and the occasion, with the tallest reserved for the most prestigious individuals. Historians believe that the okobo served multiple purposes. Practically speaking, they helped keep the wearer's kimono hem off the ground, especially in muddy or wet conditions. Symbolically, they represented elegance, refinement, and a detachment from the mundane world. By elevating the maiko physically, the okobo also elevated her status, making her appear taller, more graceful, and more otherworldly. Of course, the true function of okobo is still a matter of scholarly debate. Some historians emphasize their practical role, pointing to their use in protecting the kimono from dirt and water. Others focus on their symbolic significance, arguing that the okobo represented the maiko's elevated status and her commitment to the arts. Still others explore the connection between okobo and traditional Japanese footwear practices, tracing their evolution from earlier forms of elevated sandals. The debates continue, each theory adding another layer of complexity to the story of these fascinating shoes. But for me, the okobo were more than just a historical artifact or a subject of academic discussion. They were a part of my identity, a tangible representation of my journey. They were a reminder of the sacrifices I was making, the discipline I was cultivating, and the beauty I was striving to embody. With every click of the okobo against the pavement, I was one step closer to my dream of becoming a geisha. One painful, precarious, perfectly balanced step. The world swam into focus through a haze of white makeup. My lips, painted a vibrant cherry red, felt stiff and unfamiliar. The heavy silk of my kurota-mesode, the black formal kimono worn for my misadashi, rustled with every tiny movement, a constant whisper against the elaborate obi tied tightly around my waist. I could feel the weight of expectation pressing down, a tangible force amidst the flurry of activity surrounding me. Today was the day, my misadashi, my formal debut as a Maiko. The culmination of years of rigorous training, compressed into a single, meticulously orchestrated performance. The okiya bustled with the controlled chaos of last-minute preparations. My onsen fussed over the drape of my kimono, adjusting the folds with practiced hands. Another Maiko carefully placed the final kanzashi, an elaborate silver crane, into the towering shimada hairstyle that felt like it weighed more than my head. Again, I swear, my neck ached just thinking about the hours I'd spent sitting perfectly still while the hairdressers sculpted and lacquered my hair into this gravity-defying creation. It was adorned with an array of ornate hairpins, shimmering flowers, and dangling ornaments that caught the light with every turn of my head. Beautiful, yes, but also a constant reminder of the formality and significance of this day. A small, nervous laugh escaped my lips, quickly stifled by my Okasan's sharp glance. This wasn't just a celebration, it was a presentation, a meticulously crafted introduction to Kyoto's elite, a performance designed to impress potential patrons and establish my presence within the flower and willow world. Every gesture, every word, every smile was scrutinized. My future depended on it. Taking a deep breath, I smoothed down the already perfectly smooth silk of my kimono and tried to ignore the butterflies fluttering in my stomach. My one-Yizun offered me a reassuring smile, her eyes sparkling with a mixture of pride and amusement. She knew exactly what I was feeling. She'd gone through this herself not so long ago. And then, it was time. The doors of the okiya slid open, revealing the bustling streets of Gion. The crisp autumn air was a welcome contrast to the stifling atmosphere inside. My Okasan led the way, followed by my one-Yizun and me, our geta clicking rhythmically against the cobblestones. The route for the Misadashi procession was carefully planned, a tour of tea houses and establishments frequented by influential figures in Kyoto. It was a chance for me to be seen, to make a first impression, to begin building the network of connections that would be crucial to my success as a Maiko. Each tea house brought a new wave of introductions, greetings, and polite conversation. I performed the dances I had practiced countless times, my movements precise and graceful despite the weight of my elaborate attire and the nervous energy buzzing through my veins. I offered tea and sweets, engaging in light banter, careful to maintain the appropriate level of decorum and charm. My smile felt plastered on my face, but I maintained it nonetheless, a mask of composure hiding the turmoil within. I was acutely aware of the eyes on me, assessing my every move. Were my gestures elegant enough? Was my conversation witty enough? Did I exude the right blend of innocence and sophistication? These were the questions that danced in my mind, a constant undercurrent to polite exchanges and formal greetings. The Misadashi, I was quickly learning, was a delicate dance between tradition and performance. It was a ritual steeped in history, a symbolic crossing of the threshold into the world of professional entertainment. And yet it was also a meticulously crafted performance, a carefully orchestrated introduction to a world that thrived on beauty, artistry, and the subtle art of allure. Later, back in the quiet sanctuary of the okiya, the weight of the day finally began to lift. The elaborate hairstyle was dismantled, the heavy kimono carefully folded and stored away. My tired muscles ached, and my face felt stiff from the constant smiling. But beneath the exhaustion, a sense of accomplishment bloomed. I had done it. I hadn't tripped, I hadn't stumbled over my words, I had maintained the composure expected of a newly debuted Maiko. I had nailed it. The significance of the Misadashi wasn't lost on me. It was more than just a ceremony. It was a pivotal moment in my journey. It marked my official entry into the Karyukai, the flower and willow world, a world that promised both beauty and hardship, artistry and sacrifice. I knew that the path ahead would be challenging, filled with long hours of training, demanding patrons, and the constant pressure to maintain the image of a perfect Maiko. But I also knew that this was the life I had chosen, the life I had been preparing for since I first stepped foot into the okiya. And as I drifted off to sleep, the faint scent of sandalwood and the echo of shamisen music still lingering in the air, I felt a quiet sense of anticipation for what the future held. The Misadashi was just the beginning. My journey had just begun. And while scholars debated the social and economic implications of this ancient ritual, examining its role in establishing a geisha's reputation and attracting patrons. I knew, deep down, that it was more than just a transaction, more than just a performance. It was a transformation, a step into a world that was both alluring and demanding, a world that would shape me in ways I couldn't yet imagine. And in that moment, on the cusp of a new chapter, I felt a flicker of excitement, a spark of anticipation for the unknown adventures that lay ahead. The paper doors slid shut with a soft whisper, sealing me within the okiya, a world that now felt less like a sanctuary and more like a gilded cage. The air, thick with the scent of jasmine and the faint rustle of silk, hummed with a tension I hadn't noticed before. The other Maiko, my sisters in training, were no longer just colleagues but rivals in a delicate, unspoken war. Their smiles, once seemingly warm and welcoming, now held a brittle edge, their compliments delivered with a saccharine sweetness that left a bitter aftertaste. This was the Mean Girls Club, Edo-era style, and I was the new initiate, stumbling through its intricate rules and hidden agendas. I learned quickly that the okiya was a silent battlefield. Battles were fought not with raised voices or physical blows, but with whispered rumors and perfectly timed compliments, with subtly raised eyebrows and the careful placement of a fan. A misplaced hairpin, a slightly off-key note during shamisen practice. Every flaw was noted, magnified, and weaponized. Kindness, I discovered, was a currency, carefully dispensed, and often counterfeit. One moment, a senior Maiko might be offering helpful advice on the proper way to tie an obi. The next she would be subtly undermining me in front of the okasan, highlighting my awkwardness or lack of grace. It was a disorienting experience, this shift in atmosphere. I'd come to the okiya seeking community, a sense of belonging, but instead, I found myself navigating a treacherous social landscape. The camaraderie I'd initially felt was slowly eroding, replaced by a simmering undercurrent of competition. Every interaction felt charged, every gesture scrutinized. Even the simplest conversation could be a minefield, laden with hidden meanings and subtle digs. The reality of this competition was undeniable. Each of us was striving for the same limited resources: the okasan's favor, the attention of patrons, the coveted role of atarashi, the newest debutante. Our training, though shared, was ultimately a race to the top, a constant struggle to outshine the others. While we were taught the arts of grace and refinement, we were also learning the subtle art of one-upmanship. We were, in essence, geishas in training, and competition, however subtle and indirect, was woven into the fabric of our existence. One of the most intriguing aspects of this unspoken war was the use of fan language. Our sensu, the delicate folding fans we carried everywhere, became weapons in this silent conflict. A flick of the wrist, the angle of the fan, the way it was held against the lips. Each gesture conveyed a specific message, often one that couldn't be spoken aloud. It was the original shade, a way to express disapproval, amusement, or even outright contempt without uttering a single word. A slow, deliberate opening of the fan could signify boredom, while a sharp snap could convey irritation. Learning to decipher this intricate code became essential for survival within the okiya. The other Maiko were masters of this silent language. I watched in awe and trepidation as they communicated with each other through a series of seemingly innocuous gestures. A slight tilt of the head, a flutter of the fan. Messages were exchanged, secrets shared, judgments passed, all without a word being spoken. I struggled to keep up, feeling like an outsider eavesdropping on a conversation I couldn't understand. I knew I needed to master this art if I wanted to navigate the complex social dynamics of the okiya. The nature and intensity of this competition, however, is a subject of debate among scholars who study geisha culture. Some emphasize the supportive aspects of okiya life, portraying it as a sisterhood where women helped each other navigate the challenges of their profession. They argue that the shared experiences and rigorous training forged strong bonds between the women, creating a sense of solidarity and mutual support. They point to the role of the okasan as a maternal figure, guiding and protecting her charges, and to the relationships between senior and junior Maiko, where mentorship and guidance were commonplace. Other historians, however, paint a different picture, highlighting the potential for rivalry and jealousy within the okiya. They argue that the inherent competition for patronage and status inevitably led to tension and conflict between the women. They point to instances of sabotage and backstabbing, of rumors spread and reputations ruined. They suggest that the pressure to succeed, combined with the close quarters and constant scrutiny, created a breeding ground for resentment and animosity. The truth, as is often the case, likely lies somewhere in between these two extremes. The Okiya was undoubtedly a complex and multifaceted environment, capable of fostering both intense competition and genuine affection. While rivalry and jealousy were certainly present, so too were bonds of friendship and support. The women who lived and trained together shared a unique and intimate connection, forged in the crucible of their shared profession. They understood each other's struggles, their anxieties, their dreams. They relied on each other for emotional support, for practical advice, and for companionship in a world that often felt isolating and demanding. As I navigated the treacherous currents of Okiya life, I learned to recognize both the genuine smiles and the veiled insults. I learned to decipher the subtle language of the fan, to read between the lines of carefully crafted compliments, and to anticipate the hidden agendas behind seemingly innocent gestures. I learned, in short, to survive in the Mean Girls Club, Edo-era style. And in doing so, I began to understand the complexities of the geisha world, a world of beauty and artistry, but also of competition, ambition, and the ever-present struggle for survival. Years melted away like snow in the spring sun. The awkward fumbles of my early training transformed into the graceful movements of a seasoned dancer. The shamisen strings sang beneath my fingertips, weaving melodies that echoed the laughter and whispers of the tea house. My voice, once hesitant, now flowed effortlessly, reciting poetry that painted vivid pictures in the minds of my listeners. I had mastered the art of being a geisha. More than the music, the dance, the poetry, I had mastered the complex social choreography of Edo society. I learned to anticipate the needs of my patrons, to steer conversations with a subtle grace, to be the embodiment of elegance and charm. I was a living work of art, each gesture, each word, each glance carefully considered and perfectly executed. My true emotions, my hopes and fears, my joys and sorrows, were hidden beneath layers of oshiroi, the thick white makeup that masked my face like a porcelain doll. My smiles, meticulously practiced, became my shield, deflecting scrutiny and revealing nothing of the turmoil that sometimes brewed beneath the surface. I was a pro now. Fake it till you make it. That was the mantra I lived by. And fake it I did. Every day I donned the elaborate kimono, the heavy wig, the painted mask. Every day I entered the tea house with a serene smile, ready to entertain, to enchant, to be the perfect geisha. There was no room for genuine tears, no outbursts of anger, no displays of vulnerability. A geisha was expected to maintain a composed and serene demeanor at all times, regardless of her personal feelings. Whether I was heartbroken by a lost love, frustrated by a difficult patron, or simply exhausted from the endless performances, my face remained an impassive canvas, my demeanor unwavering. This unwavering composure was not just expected, it was demanded. It was the cornerstone of our profession. We were not merely entertainers. We were the embodiment of grace under pressure, of serenity in a chaotic world. We were the calm at the center of the storm. The constant pressure to maintain this facade took its toll. Sometimes, behind the painted smile, I felt like I was suffocating, but I learned to compartmentalize, to tuck away my true feelings in a hidden corner of my heart. I built walls around my inner self, protecting it from the prying eyes of the world. And in those moments of quiet solitude, when the mask finally came off and the makeup was washed away, I allowed myself to feel. I allowed myself to grieve, to rage, to simply be. These stolen moments became my sanctuary, the only place where I could truly be myself. One of the secrets to maintaining that flawless mask, that impeccable image, was a thin, almost translucent sheet of paper called Abura Torigami. It was the original blotting paper. Genius, really. The humid Edo air, combined with the thick layers of makeup, could create a sheen of oil on even the most perfectly powdered face. But a quick dab with Abura Torigami, and the oil was absorbed, leaving the makeup pristine. It was a small thing, a seemingly insignificant detail, but it was symbolic of the meticulous attention we paid to every aspect of our appearance. Every detail, from the placement of a hairpin to the angle of a fan, was carefully considered and precisely executed. We were masters of illusion, crafting an image of effortless perfection that belied the hours of painstaking effort that went into creating it. Our lives, our very identities, became a subject of fascination, not just for the men who frequented the tea houses, but for scholars and historians as well. Even now, I imagine, they are poring over scrolls and diaries, trying to decipher the enigma of the geisha. They debate the psychological impact of our emotional discipline, exploring themes of identity, performance, and the construction of femininity in Edo Japan. Did we lose ourselves in the performance? Did we become so adept at playing a role that we forgot who we truly were? Or did the mask, in a strange way, become a source of strength, a shield that protected us from the harsh realities of the world? I wonder what conclusions they draw, what narratives they construct around our lives. Do they see us as victims, trapped in a gilded cage of tradition and expectation? Or do they see us as artists, skilled in the art of deception, masters of our own destinies? Perhaps they see a bit of both. The truth, as always, is far more complex. We were not simply one thing or another. We were women navigating a complex and often contradictory world. We were artists, performers, confidants, and companions. We were mothers, daughters, sisters, and friends. We were the keepers of secrets, the weavers of dreams, the faces behind the masks. And within each of us, beneath the layers of makeup and the carefully crafted smiles, there was a unique and complex individual, a woman with her own hopes, dreams, and desires. A woman who, despite the constraints of her time and place, found a way to carve out a space for herself in the world. A woman who, in the quiet moments between performances, when the mask finally came off, allowed herself to simply be. You're about to learn the most important skill of all: how to say no without ever saying no. Think of it as becoming fluent in the language of deflection, redirection, and graceful excuses. Trust me, it's a superpower, and you'll need it. Imagine yourself a social butterfly, flitting from flower to flower, sipping nectar but never getting trapped in a sticky situation. That's the goal. You want to be desired, sought after, but always just slightly out of reach. And the key to achieving this elusive state is mastering the art of the graceful decline. Think back to the geishas of Edo-era Japan. These women were masters of their own social destiny, navigating complex relationships with grace and finesse. Fact: geishas were expected to navigate delicate social situations with tact and diplomacy, avoiding direct confrontation or rejection. They were the queens of the subtle no, the mistresses of the gentle rebuff. They understood that a blunt refusal could damage their reputation and limit their options. So they developed a sophisticated system of evasion, a language of polite excuses and artful deflections. Imagine a wealthy merchant, eager for the company of a particular geisha. He sends an invitation, perhaps for an intimate dinner or a moonlit boat ride. Now, the geisha may not be interested, for any number of reasons. Perhaps she has a prior engagement, or perhaps she simply doesn't find the merchant particularly appealing. But a direct refusal would be unthinkable. It could offend the merchant, damage her reputation, and potentially impact her future earnings. So what does she do? She deploys her secret weapon, the artful excuse. And here's a quirky tidbit. A popular geisha excuse for declining an invitation was to claim a prior engagement to visit a temple or attend a tea ceremony. Because nothing says sorry, not sorry like a sudden urge for spiritual enlightenment. It's brilliant, really. Who can argue with a woman's desire to commune with the divine? It's a socially acceptable, even admirable reason for declining an invitation. The beauty of this excuse is its versatility. A temple visit could mean anything from a brief prayer to a day-long retreat. A tea ceremony could be a simple gathering with friends, or a formal event with elaborate rituals. The specifics are left deliberately vague, allowing the geisha to maintain control over her schedule without giving offense. And let's not forget the power of the implied apology. By expressing regret at her inability to accept the invitation, the geisha softens the blow and maintains a semblance of politeness. She acknowledges the merchant's desire for her company while simultaneously reaffirming her own autonomy. This wasn't just about avoiding awkward situations. It was a strategic move. These women were operating within a very specific social structure, one where their value was tied to their desirability and their ability to maintain an air of mystery. A direct no could shatter that carefully constructed image. Scholars have long been fascinated by the geisha's mastery of social dynamics. Scholarly debate. Scholars analyze the strategies employed by geishas to maintain their agency and control in interactions with clients, highlighting the nuanced dynamics of power and negotiation in Edo-era social settings. These studies delve into the intricate ways geishas navigated the complexities of their profession, using subtle cues and carefully crafted language to maintain their independence, while simultaneously cultivating relationships with powerful men. The geisha's ability to say no without actually saying no was a testament to her understanding of human psychology. She knew that a direct refusal could create resentment and damage her reputation. By employing indirect language and artful excuses, she preserved her own agency while simultaneously maintaining social harmony. This delicate balancing act was essential to her success in the highly competitive world of the pleasure quarters. Think about it. These women were essentially entrepreneurs, managing their own careers and building their own brands. Their ability to navigate the social landscape was crucial to their financial success and their overall well-being. They were masters of negotiation, using their charm and wit to secure the best possible terms for their services. And this skill, the art of the graceful decline, is just as relevant today as it was in Edo-era Japan. We all face situations where we need to say no without causing offense, whether it's declining a social invitation, turning down a request for a favor, or rejecting a business proposal. The ability to say no gracefully is a valuable asset. So how do you cultivate this superpower? Start by observing the masters. Think about the geishas and their artful excuses. Practice using indirect language, expressing regret while simultaneously reaffirming your own boundaries. Learn to deflect and redirect, steering the conversation away from unwanted requests. And remember, the key is to be polite but firm. You don't need to apologize profusely or offer elaborate explanations. A simple, "I'm so sorry but I have a prior commitment," can be just as effective as a lengthy explanation. The goal is to convey your message clearly and respectfully, without leaving any room for misinterpretation. Master this, and you'll be well on your way to becoming a social ninja, gliding through life with grace, poise, and the power to say no without ever uttering the word. The scent of sandalwood hung heavy in the air, a familiar comfort. I no longer woke to the frantic rustle of silk as I rushed to prepare for lessons. Now, mornings were met with the quiet clink of a porcelain teacup and the soft murmur of the city waking beyond the paper screens of my room. I was no longer a Maiko, scrambling to learn the intricacies of each dance step, the nuances of each carefully chosen phrase. I was a geisha, a senior geisha, and the okiya felt different now, molded around me like a second skin. My obi, once brightly colored and tied in elaborate bows, was now a subdued shade of deep indigo, tied in the simpler, more dignified taiko musubi. The elaborate hairstyles I once wore, adorned with cascading kanzashi, had given way to the more restrained shimada mage, the sleek lines reflecting my new status. Even my kimono, once vibrant with youthful patterns, now flowed in rich, dark hues embroidered with subtle designs that spoke of experience and refinement. It was my own personal brand, Edo style, a silent declaration of my position within the intricate hierarchy of the okiya. My days were no longer consumed by lessons. Now, they were filled with the gentle rustle of silk as I guided the younger Maiko through the complex steps of a traditional dance. My voice, once hesitant and questioning, now carried the weight of authority as I corrected a misplaced hand, refined a wavering melody. I saw myself reflected in their eager eyes, the same burning desire to learn, the same nervous anticipation that I once felt. I remembered my own struggles, the burning frustration of a missed step, the sting of a harsh word from Okasan, and I vowed to be a different kind of mentor, a guiding hand rather than a disciplinarian. Passing down the knowledge accumulated over years of rigorous training was more than just instruction. It was a sacred duty, a preservation of centuries-old traditions. Every carefully placed hand gesture, every precisely intoned phrase, every meticulously chosen kimono, they were all threads in the rich tapestry of geisha culture, and I was now a weaver, entrusted with its intricate patterns. I was the keeper of secrets whispered from one generation to the next, the custodian of rituals that had survived the relentless march of time. The weight of this legacy was immense, a constant presence that settled on my shoulders like a silken shawl. I felt the eyes of the okiya upon me, watching, assessing, expecting. I was the queen bee now, the silent force around which the hive revolved. My presence set the tone. My actions dictated the rhythm of the day. I held the power to uplift and to crush, but I chose to nurture, to guide, to inspire. Not yet, at least, did the sting emerge. Evenings brought a different kind of responsibility. My engagements were no longer about proving myself, about vying for attention. They were about upholding the reputation of the Okiya, about embodying the grace and elegance that defined a true geisha. I moved through the opulent tea houses with a quiet confidence, my every gesture a carefully choreographed dance. I poured sake with practiced ease, my conversation flowing like a gentle stream, weaving tales of art and poetry, music and dance. I became a confidant, a trusted advisor, a source of solace in a world that often demanded too much. The younger Maiko watched me with a mixture of awe and aspiration. They studied my every move, mimicking my gestures, echoing my phrases. I saw their youthful enthusiasm, their boundless energy, and I remembered the time when I, too, yearned to be at the center of the glittering world of the tea houses. I knew that with time and patience, they too would find their place, their own unique voice within the ancient chorus of geisha tradition. The scholarly debates about the evolving role of geishas resonated deeply within me. Historians, poring over ancient texts and faded photographs, attempted to categorize and define the transition from performer to mentor. They sought to understand the subtle shift in power dynamics within the Okiya as geishas aged, as their responsibilities shifted from entertaining guests to shaping the next generation. They saw it as a linear progression, a predictable trajectory from novice to expert to elder. But what they often missed was the subtle interplay of individual personalities, the unique circumstances that shaped each geisha's journey. There was no single narrative, no definitive answer to the question of what it meant to be a senior geisha. It was a constantly evolving role, shaped by tradition, by circumstance, and by the individual who dared to embrace its complexities. My own journey was far from over. I knew there would be challenges, trials that would test my resolve, my ability to lead. There would be moments of doubt, whispers of uncertainty that would threaten to undermine my confidence. But I was anchored by the weight of tradition, by the knowledge that I was part of something larger than myself, a lineage that stretched back through generations of remarkable women. I was a geisha, a senior geisha, and the Okiya was my domain. I would rule it with grace, with wisdom, and with the unwavering commitment to preserving the legacy that had been entrusted to me. The queen bee had found her hive, and within its intricate walls, she would continue to weave the delicate threads of tradition, ensuring that the ancient art of the geisha would endure for generations to come. The silk of my kimono whispered against polished wood floors, a sound as familiar as my own heartbeat. My obi, tied with the practiced ease of decades, felt less like a constraint and more like an anchor, grounding me in this world I now commanded. My gaze, once filled with the anxieties of a young Maiko, now swept across the room, assessing, judging, calculating. 3 young girls, barely in their teens, sat before me, their painted faces masks of nervous anticipation. They were the future, or rather my future. The future of the Ichiriki Okiya rested on their delicate shoulders, on their ability to charm, to entertain, to embody the elusive art of the geisha. Ironic, wasn't it? Me, the one who once chafed under the strictures of tradition, now the gatekeeper, the arbiter, the very embodiment of that tradition. Full circle, baby. I remembered the weight of that same gaze upon me. The scrutiny of Okasan Chiyo, her eyes like chips of obsidian, piercing through my carefully constructed facade. Now, my gaze held the same weight, the same power. These girls, with their wide eyes and trembling hands, held the future of the Ichiriki Okiya in their grasp. My gaze lingered on the smallest one, Hana. Her hands, despite the trembling, moved with a natural grace as she adjusted the folds of her kimono, a flicker of potential. Beside her, Sakura fidgeted, her eyes darting nervously towards the tokonoma. Lacked focus. The third, Akari, sat perfectly still, her gaze steady, almost challenging. Intriguing. The Ichiriki Okiya had seen better days. The changing times, the whispers of modernity, the allure of the Western world, all chipped away at the foundations of our tradition. My predecessor, bless her soul, had clung to the old ways, resistant to change. Now, it fell to me to navigate these treacherous waters, to ensure the Ichiriki not only survived, but thrived. And that meant choosing the right investments, These girls, these fledgling Maiko, were my investments. My informants, a motley crew of dressmakers, hairdressers, and even a sake brewer, whispered tales of shifting tastes, of wealthy patrons seeking new diversions, of rival Okiya plotting our downfall. It was a delicate dance, this game of whispers and shadows. It was the original intelligence agency, Edo edition. I sifted through the information, discarding the frivolous, analyzing the pertinent, piecing together the puzzle of the Kyoto social scene, knowing who was rising, who was falling, who held true power, and who merely pretended this was the key to survival. Hana! My voice, honed by years of command, resonated through the room. The girl startled, her gaze snapping to mine. Your calligraphy, it shows promise. But you lack discipline. Your strokes are hesitant. You must be bold, decisive, just as you must be in life. Hana dipped her head, her cheeks flushing crimson. Hi, Oka-san! Sakura, I continued, my gaze shifting to the fidgeting girl. Your shamisen playing adequate, but your heart is not in it. Why? Sakura's eyes welled with tears. I miss my family, Oka-san. A familiar pang resonated within me. I remembered that ache, that longing for a life left behind. But sentimentality had no place in this world. Your family entrusted you to me, Sakura. They believe in your potential. Do not disappoint them or me. Finally, my gaze settled on Akari. You have a fire in your eyes, child. A hunger. What do you seek here? Akari met my gaze without flinching. To become the best, Oka-san. To surpass all others. Ambition. Dangerous, but also necessary. A small smile played on my lips. Perhaps, just perhaps, this one had the makings of a true geisha. Later that evening, I sat alone in my room, surrounded by the ledgers and correspondence that had become my constant companions. The weight of responsibility pressed down on me, a heavy cloak woven from tradition and expectation. Historians I mused, those scholars tucked away in their dusty libraries, they pondered the role of the Oka-san, dissecting our influence, analyzing our impact on geisha culture and social order. They saw us as guardians of tradition, as enforcers of social norms, as manipulators of power. Perhaps they were right, but they didn't see the sacrifices, the sleepless nights, the constant worry, the burden of shaping young lives, of guiding them through the labyrinthine world of the geisha. I thought of Chiyo, my own Oka-san, a woman of iron will and unwavering dedication. She had molded me, shaped me, sometimes with a gentle hand, sometimes with a sharp rebuke. I had resented her then, but now I understood. She had done what she believed was best, not just for me, but for the Ichiriki Okiya. And now it was my turn. The flickering candlelight cast dancing shadows on the walls, transforming familiar objects into grotesque figures. I closed my eyes, taking a deep breath. The scent of incense, of sandalwood and jasmine, filled the air, a comforting reminder of the world I inhabited. The world I now ruled. I opened my eyes, my gaze resolute. The future of the Ichiriki Okiya was in my hands. And I would not fail. The air itself felt different. It crackled with a restless energy, a tangible hum that vibrated through the wooden floors of the Okiya and into the very marrow of the inhabitants. The scent of coal smoke, a new and acrid presence, mingled with the familiar perfume of cherry blossoms and the subtle fragrance of tatami mats. Kyoto, once a haven of ancient tradition, was changing. The whispers started subtly, like the rustle of silk beneath an obi, growing louder with each passing day. Talk of Meiji, of restoration, of emperors and parliaments, and strange foreign ideas. The world outside, a world the Okiya had always held at a carefully measured distance, was pushing its way in. The Meiji Restoration. 1868. A year etched in the minds of everyone, a demarcation line between the old ways and what? No one knew for sure. The old certainties, the comforting rhythms of life, were dissolving. The rigid social structures, the unquestioned hierarchy, began to tremble, and for the geisha, creatures of ritual and tradition, this tremor threatened to upend their entire world. The talk in the Okiya was a mixture of anxiety and bewildered fascination. Newspapers, once rare and precious, became common, filled with stories of trains that moved without horses, of messages sent across wires, of foreign dignitaries arriving in Western dress, their clothes stiff and angular, their faces pale and serious. Okasan would read aloud from them, her voice a blend of awe and apprehension, while the younger geisha huddled around, their eyes wide. Some of the girls, the more daring ones, saw opportunity in the chaos. They whispered about the new fashions arriving from the West, the extravagant bustles and the delicate lace. Imagine, one giggled, a geisha in a bustle. The very idea was both shocking and strangely alluring. One particularly bold Maiko, known for her playful spirit, even managed to acquire a pair of white gloves, which she wore with a mischievous glint in her eye, pairing them with her traditional kimono. It was a clash of cultures, a visible representation of the changes sweeping through the land. Other geisha, particularly the older ones, clung to the familiar. They saw the Western influence as a corruption, a threat to the delicate art they had spent their lives perfecting. They worried that the allure of the new would overshadow the elegance of the old, that the traditions they held sacred would be forgotten. They lamented the changing tastes of their patrons, some of whom were now more fascinated by the novelty of Western entertainment than the refined arts of the tea house. The very role of the geisha was being questioned. Were they artists? Entertainers? Something else entirely? The lines blurred. The world outside, once so predictable, now shifted like sand beneath their feet. The future, once a clear path laid out by tradition, became shrouded in uncertainty. Change was coming, whether you like it or not, and the Okiya, once a sanctuary, was now exposed to the winds of change. Scholars, looking back on this period, debate the true impact of the Meiji Restoration on geisha culture. Some argue that it marked the beginning of a decline, a slow erosion of their status and influence. They point to the rise of Western-style entertainment, the changing social dynamics, and the increasing opportunities for women outside the traditional roles. These historians paint a picture of a world that had little place for the delicate arts of the geisha, a world that valued progress and efficiency above all else. Others, however, offer a different perspective. They argue that the geisha, far from being victims of change, were masters of adaptation. They highlight the ways in which geisha incorporated elements of Western culture into their art, adapting to the changing tastes of their patrons, while still preserving the core of their traditions. They point to the resilience of the geisha districts, their ability to survive and even thrive in the face of modernization. These historians see the Meiji period not as a decline, but as a transformation, a period of reinvention that allowed the geisha to carve out a new place for themselves in a rapidly changing world. The truth, as is often the case, likely lies somewhere in between. The Meiji Restoration undoubtedly brought challenges for the geisha. Their world was disrupted, their traditions questioned, their future uncertain. But amidst the turmoil, there was also opportunity. The geisha, ever adaptable, found ways to navigate the changing landscape, to blend the old with the new, to preserve the essence of their art while embracing the winds of change. The whispers of change, once a source of anxiety, became a catalyst for evolution. And within the walls of the Okiya, a new chapter began, a chapter filled with both uncertainty and the promise of a future yet unwritten. The scent of cherry blossoms, once so potent, seemed fainter now, a ghostly fragrance clinging to the edges of memory. The bustling streets of Gion, once alive with the rustle of silk kimonos and the click of geta sandals, echoed with a different rhythm. The blare of jazz music from a nearby club, the rumble of passing automobiles. The party, as someone had so aptly put it, was over. And the hangover? Oh, the hangover was just beginning. The Okiya, once a vibrant hub of activity, felt like a slowly emptying vessel. The younger girls, lured by the promises of the modern world, sought brighter lights, different stages. They traded the intricacies of the shamisen for the catchy tunes of Western pop songs, the subtle art of conversation for the immediacy of the silver screen. Kimonos gathered dust in forgotten chests, replaced by the sleek lines of Western dresses. Even the older gaiko, the pillars of our world, seemed to carry a heavier weight in their steps, a quiet resignation in their eyes. I remember watching Okasan pore over dwindling account books, her brow furrowed in worry. The requests for our performances were fewer and farther between. Men, once captivated by the elegance and mystery of the geisha, now sought their entertainment elsewhere. In the flashing neon lights of nightclubs, in the company of women who offered a different kind of allure. The world was changing, and we, the keepers of tradition, were struggling to keep pace. One evening I found Hane, one of the younger gaiko, staring out the window at a passing group of girls in brightly colored skirts. Her usual playful demeanor was replaced by a pensive quiet. "They look so free," she murmured, her voice barely a whisper. A few weeks later, she was gone. She didn't run away, not in the traditional sense. She simply left. She enrolled in a secretarial school, eager to embrace the new world that beckoned just beyond the confines of Gion. Others followed suit. Some, like Honey, sought the stability of office work. Others, with a more entrepreneurial spirit, opened small businesses, tea rooms, flower shops, even a boutique selling Western-style clothing. They took the skills honed over years of training, the art of conversation, the grace of movement, the understanding of human nature, and applied them to these new ventures. Adaptability, I realized, was the ultimate survival skill. It was a quiet revolution, a subtle rebellion against the fading world we inhabited. The kiddo, as they say, was growing up. The Okia became a haven for those who chose to remain, a sanctuary for the memories of a bygone era. We still held our gatherings, the older Geico sharing stories of packed tea houses, of influential patrons, of the golden age of Gion. But these gatherings felt more like a remembrance, a gentle mourning for what was lost. The laughter was tinged with melancholy, the music laced with nostalgia. I often found myself wandering through the old geisha district, my steps echoing in the quiet streets. I'd pause before the tea houses, their once brightly lit entrances now dimmed, their doors closed. I'd see glimpses of the past in the faded paint, in the worn wooden steps, in the ghostly music that seemed to linger in the air. It was a bittersweet experience, a constant reminder of the transient nature of beauty, of tradition, of life itself. I started writing. Not for publication, not for fame, but for myself. I wrote about the rituals, the ceremonies, the unspoken language of the geisha world. I wrote about the women I had known, the strong, the vulnerable, the resilient. I wrote about the changing times, about the challenges we faced, about the quiet dignity with which we navigated the shifting tides of society. I learned that scholars, intrigued by the evolving role of the geisha, were documenting our stories. They came to Gion, these academics, with their notebooks and their questions, seeking to understand the intricacies of our world, the reasons for its decline, the ways in which we adapted. They debated the impact of Western influence, the role of changing social attitudes, the future of geisha culture in the modern era. Their interest, while appreciated, also felt like a confirmation of our fading relevance. We were becoming a subject of study, a historical footnote, rather than a living, breathing part of society. The hangover, it seemed, was a slow, lingering one. It wasn't a sharp pain, but a dull ache, a constant reminder of what had been. The vibrant colors of the past had faded, replaced by the muted tones of the present. The music had softened, the laughter quieted. But the memories, the memories remained. They lingered like the scent of cherry blossoms in the spring air, a testament to a world that was changing, a world that would never be quite the same again. And in the quiet moments, in the stillness of the Okia, I could almost hear the echoes of the past, whispering stories of a time when the geisha reigned supreme, when the party was in full swing, and the future seemed as endless as the night sky. My time has passed. The world I knew, a world of gas lamps and rickshaws, of whispered secrets behind painted fans and the scent of jasmine hair oil clinging to the air, that world is gone. But the spirit of the geisha, that endures. It whispers in the rustle of silk still worn, in the click of a kobo, perhaps a touch more modern now, on polished wooden floors. It's in the subtle flick of a fan, a language unspoken yet understood. I see it. I feel it. Even now, as I drift through the world unseen, a whisper of memory, a stylish ghost, you might say. It amuses me, this modern world. All flashing lights and buzzing screens. The pace, the noise. It's dizzying. Yet amidst the chaos, the heart of the geisha beats on. Smaller, yes. Not the vibrant, bustling flower it once was. More a carefully tended bonsai, delicate and precious. But alive. Thriving even. In Kyoto, in Gion, in the quiet alleys of other hidden districts, the traditions continue. The lessons, the music, the dance, the art of conversation, passed down, generation to generation, a living thread connecting the past to the present. And can you imagine? These modern geishas, they embrace the technology of this new age. Social media, they call it. They post pictures of their elaborate hairstyles, their exquisite kimono. They share snippets of their performances, teasing glimpses of the world behind the closed doors of the Ochaya. They connect with admirers, build their reputation, promote their events. It's resourceful. Even ghosts need good PR, after all. It's a different world, certainly. In my time, such public display would have been unthinkable. But the core remains: the careful cultivation of an image, the strategic management of reputation. It's just amplified, broadcasted to the world. I sometimes wonder what those girls would think of me, a geisha of a bygone era. Would they see me as a relic? A ghost story whispered in the shadows? Or would they recognize a kindred spirit, a sister in the art? Perhaps they'd be surprised to find how much we have in common. The dedication to their craft, the long hours of practice, the pressure to maintain a flawless facade. These are things that transcend time. The sacrifices made for the art. I see the debates swirling around them, carried on the very winds that carry me. Scholars, journalists, cultural commentators, they dissect and analyze the geisha of today. Is it a dying art, clinging to the edges of modernity? Or is it a dynamic tradition, constantly evolving to meet the demands of a changing world? Is it exploitation, a romanticized relic of a feudal past? Or is it empowerment, a celebration of female artistry and resilience? The questions echo, unanswered, hanging in the air like the lingering scent of incense. The heart of the debate, I believe, lies in the representation of Japanese identity. In a globalized world, where cultures collide and blend, the geisha has become an iconic symbol of Japan. But what does that symbol truly represent? For some, it's a nostalgic image of a romanticized past, a vision of traditional Japan frozen in time. For others, it's a living embodiment of Japanese artistry and cultural sophistication. And for still others, it's a troubling reminder of gender inequality and the objectification of women. The truth, as always, is far more complex than any single interpretation. The geisha has always been more than just a performer. She is a keeper of traditions, a preserver of artistry, a living embodiment of a unique cultural heritage. She is a musician, a dancer, a storyteller, a hostess, a conversationalist, and so much more. She is a carefully constructed persona, a work of art in herself. And like any work of art, she is open to interpretation, subject to the biases and perspectives of those who behold her. I watch the modern geisha navigate this complex landscape, balancing the weight of tradition with the demands of the present. They embrace the new while honoring the old. They adapt, they innovate, they find ways to make the ancient arts relevant in a rapidly changing world. And in doing so, they ensure that the spirit of the geisha continues to live on, not as a dusty relic of the past, but as a vibrant, evolving expression of Japanese culture. Perhaps the future of the geisha lies not in clinging rigidly to the past, but in embracing the present while honoring the traditions that have shaped it. Perhaps it lies in finding new ways to tell the old stories, new ways to express the timeless artistry that lies at the heart of the geisha's world. Perhaps it lies in continuing to challenge perceptions, to spark conversations, to provoke thought and debate. And perhaps, just perhaps, it lies in the quiet rustle of silk, the click of okubo, and the subtle flick of a fan, reminding the world that some traditions, though they may transform, never truly fade away. They simply find new ways to whisper their secrets to the world. The staircase fades. The mountain disappears. You are left with the echo of a life lived in careful balance. Performance and resistance. Tradition and reinvention. Your name may be forgotten, but your art, the art of the geisha, remains. Good night, and try not to spill any rice in your dreams. You awaken in your bed, the remnants of the dream fading like incense smoke. A thin line of gray light peeks through the edges of the curtains, barely illuminating the familiar objects in your room. The silken folds of your sleeping robe pool around you, a comforting weight against the chill of the early morning air. The room is quiet, the world outside still dark. The rhythmic ticking of the old clock on your dresser is the only sound, a steady pulse in the stillness. But within you a spark remains, a quiet sense of strength, resilience, and the enduring power of legacy. A warmth blooms in your chest, not a fiery passion, but a deep ember, glowing with the knowledge of generations of women who came before you, who navigated the complexities of their world with grace and unwavering determination. Their stories, their whispers, their echoes reside within you, a silent chorus reminding you of the enduring power of the unfading art. The memory of the mountain, sharp and imposing just moments ago, now softens, its edges blurring like a watercolor painting left in the rain. The elaborate costumes, the intricate dances, the hushed conversations behind painted fans, they too begin to lose their vividness, transforming into a gentle, impressionistic tableau. The intensity of the geisha's life, the demanding rituals, the constant pressure to maintain an illusion of effortless perfection, these memories recede like the tide, leaving behind a smooth, quiet beach. The vocabulary simplifies, shedding the ornate language of the dream. The clipped, formal phrases of the okiya, the flowery compliments exchanged during tea ceremonies, these dissolve into the simple, comforting words of home. The complexities of the floating world, the carefully constructed facades, the subtle manipulations of power, all fade away, leaving only the essential truths. The warmth of your bed, the quiet peace of your room, the gentle rhythm of your breath. The sentences lengthen, unfurling like silk ribbons. The dream's staccato bursts of images, the rapid shifts in perspective, the disorienting jumps in time, all give way to a slow, steady flow. The feeling of urgency, the constant need to perform, to please, to maintain the delicate balance between tradition and modernity, dissipates, replaced by a sense of calm, a sense of belonging, a sense of being exactly where you are meant to be. You are safe. You are home. The walls of your room embrace you, familiar and comforting. The soft glow of the pre-dawn light filters through the window, painting the room in gentle hues of gray and lavender. The air is still, filled with the faint scent of jasmine from the small vase on your bedside table. You are no longer the geisha, balancing on the precarious edge of tradition and reinvention. You are simply yourself, wrapped in the quiet solitude of your own space, free to breathe, to think, to just be. The echoes of the past fade into a gentle whisper, like the rustle of silk kimonos against polished wood floors. The sharp, demanding voices of the dream okiya soften into the gentle murmur of your own inner voice, reassuring you that the strength and resilience you witnessed, the unfading art you glimpsed, these are not just remnants of a dream, but a part of you, a part of your heritage, a part of the enduring spirit of women who have, throughout history, found ways to create beauty and meaning in a world that often tries to silence them. Good night, sleep well, and may your dreams be filled with the gentle rustle of silk and the quiet click of okobo on polished wood. May you carry with you the quiet strength of the geisha, the resilience of her spirit, and the enduring power of her art, not as a burden, but as a source of inspiration, a reminder that even in the face of challenge and change, beauty and tradition can endure, reinventing themselves, adapting, and ultimately prevailing. May you wake with the same quiet sense of peace and belonging that you feel now, knowing that you are connected to a legacy of strength and grace, a legacy that will continue to unfold generation after generation like the delicate petals of a blooming lotus flower.